They say humiliation is harmless until it detonates. And the day Judge Harold Whitmore laughed at a black mother in his courtroom was the day he unknowingly signed the first page of his own investigation file. In Fulton County Courtroom 3B, power didn't whisper, it performed. It leaned back in a leather chair beneath the state seal, adjusted a silk robe, and smirked at anyone who didn't look like they belonged. Judge Whitmore had built a reputation not for wisdom, but for spectacle. He liked his defendants nervous and his courtroom entertained. If he came in with a public defender, he barely looked at you. If you came in alone, he sharpened his tone like a blade. And if you dared to challenge him, he made sure the entire gallery felt the heat. That morning, the air inside the courthouse was thick with recycled arrogance and cheap cologne when Danielle Brooks walked through the double doors holding nothing but a manila folder and her son's future in her hands. She wasn't dressed to impress. No tailored blazer. No designer heels. Just a navy blouse, modest slacks, and flat shoes worn thin at the heel. Behind her stood Marcus Brooks, 17, honor roll student, part-time grocery clerk, and currently charged with felony vandalism for allegedly spray painting a city-owned retaining wall at 9:45 p.m. on a Thursday night. The arrest report described him as combative and uncooperative. The recommended sentence included juvenile detention and a permanent record. The prosecution had already whispered the word gang adjacent into the file, the way poison gets slipped into tea. When Danielle stepped up to the defense table, Judge Whitmore didn't see a mother prepared to fight. He saw what he had trained himself to see, another underprepared parent who thought passion could substitute for procedure. He glanced down at the docket and spoke without looking at her. "Ms. Brooks, you are the defendant's guardian." His voice carried the bored impatience of a man who believed outcomes were predetermined. "Yes, Your Honor," Danielle replied evenly. Whitmore finally looked up, his gaze scanning her from head to toe, lingering just long enough to communicate disdain. "And I assume counsel will be arriving shortly?" A few chuckles echoed from the back row where junior attorneys sat waiting for their cases to be called. Danielle didn't flinch. "I'll be representing my son today." That was when Whitmore laughed. Not loudly, not explosively, but with the soft, dismissive chuckle of someone certain he was witnessing a mistake. "You'll be representing him," he repeated into the microphone, ensuring every spectator heard it. "Ma'am, this is a criminal proceeding, not a school board complaint." The courtroom shifted, even the bailiff smirked. Marcus stiffened beside his mother, embarrassment creeping up his neck. Danielle placed her folder calmly on the table. "I'm prepared to proceed, Your Honor." Whitmore leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach. "Prepared? In what capacity? Did you stay at a Holiday Inn Express?" More laughter. He enjoyed this part, the soft dismantling of confidence before the real ruling began. "Perhaps you'd like a moment to reconsider and request a public defender." "I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself." Danielle met his gaze. Her expression didn't harden, it clarified. "No, Your Honor. I'm ready." The prosecutor, Assistant DA Collins, stood with a faint smile. "The state is ready as well." Whitmore waved a hand. "Very well. Let's proceed with this experiment." The first witness was a city maintenance worker who claimed he saw Marcus tagging the wall from across the street. Danielle listened without interruption, taking notes in steady, deliberate strokes. Whitmore watched her the way one watches a child attempting advanced math, waiting for the inevitable collapse. But collapse never came. When the witness finished, Danielle rose with a composure that felt out of place in someone allegedly improvising. "You testified that the incident occurred at 9:45 p.m., correct?" she asked. "Yes." "And you were approximately 40 feet away?" "That sounds right." "Under a streetlight that had been reported malfunctioning 2 weeks prior?" The witness hesitated. The prosecutor blinked. Whitmore leaned forward slightly. I don't recall," the witness admitted. Danielle nodded once. Would reviewing the city maintenance log refresh her memory? She held up a document. The courtroom murmured. Whitmore's smirk thinned. Collins objected weakly, but Danielle responded with procedural citations delivered cleanly, without hesitation. This wasn't guesswork. This was orchestration. Whitmore tapped his pen against the bench, irritation flickering beneath the surface. He didn't like surprises, especially not from people he had already decided were beneath the game. "Ms. Brooks," he interrupted. "Let's not waste the court's time with theatrics." Danielle's eyes lifted slowly to meet his. "I assure you, Your Honor, I never waste time. Something in her tone shifted the temperature by a degree. Not defiance. Not anger. Precision. Whitmore felt it. The subtle shift from amusement to discomfort, and doubled down. See that you don't, he said sharply. This court has little patience for amateur lawyering. The gallery waited for her to retreat, to falter, to apologize. Instead, Danielle placed another document on the table, squared her shoulders, and continued questioning with the calm rhythm of someone who understood not only the rules, but the consequences of breaking them. What Judge Whitmore didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that Danielle Brooks had chosen this courtroom for a reason. She had filed her appearance without credentials on purpose. She had dressed down deliberately. She had allowed the laughter. Because sometimes the quickest way to expose arrogance is to let it speak freely. And Judge Whitmore, basking in his own certainty, had no idea that the woman he was mocking wasn't just a mother defending her son. She was measuring him. Every word, every ruling, every smirk. And by the time the gavel would fall, it wouldn't be Marcus Brooks whose future was hanging in the balance. By the time Officer Keller took the stand, the courtroom was no longer amused, it was watching. He repeated his claim with steady confidence. He saw Marcus vandalizing city property at 9:45 p.m., identified him clearly, and made the arrest without hesitation. Assistant DA Collins looked satisfied. Judge Whitmore leaned back again, though this time without the earlier smirk. Your witness, the judge said. Danielle stood. Officer, you testified the area was well lit? She asked calmly. Yes. She displayed his patrol log on the screen. Then why does your own report describe the street light as malfunctioning? A pause. Keller shifted. It was still visible. From 40 feet away, she pressed. At night. No answer came quickly. Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She pulled up security footage from a nearby bank. The timestamp read 9:42 p.m. Marcus stood at the counter making a deposit from his grocery shift. The footage rolled forward. 9:43, 9:44, 9:45. Still inside. A murmur spread across the room. The alleged vandalism occurred 1.3 miles away, Danielle said evenly. Are you suggesting my son teleported? Even Judge Whitmore's expression tightened. Danielle continued. No spray paint was found on him. No cans were recovered. And this arrest report, she highlighted a section, shows refusal to answer questions marked before he was even read his rights. Keller swallowed. Clerical error. Twice this year, Danielle replied, placing 2 additional reports on the screen with identical discrepancies. The courtroom fell silent. The laughter from earlier felt like a distant mistake. Danielle stepped back to the defense table. No further questions. For the first time that morning, Judge Whitmore wasn't entertained. He was concerned. And the woman he had dismissed was just getting started. The courtroom felt different when everyone returned from recess. The air was no longer thick with amusement. It was heavy with awareness. Judge Whitmore adjusted his robe, but the confidence he wore earlier didn't quite settle back into place. Assistant DA Collins shuffled papers that suddenly seemed less convincing. Officer Keller avoided eye contact altogether. And Danielle Brooks sat exactly as she had before, calm, composed, unshaken. Whitmore cleared his throat. Ms. Brooks, do you have anything further before I consider ruling? Danielle rose slowly. There was no drama in the movement, no need for it. Yes, Your Honor. Briefly, she stepped into the open space between the defense table and the bench, not pacing now, not pressing, simply standing. This case, she began evenly, should never have advanced beyond preliminary review. The timeline is inconsistent. The identification unreliable. The report procedurally flawed. And the evidence, she gestured lightly toward the screen, is exculpatory. She paused, allowing the facts to breathe. My son was presumed guilty before documentation was even completed. That is not diligence. That is assumption. A faint tension flickered across Whitmore's face. Danielle continued, her tone steady but edged with something firmer now. When assumption replaces process, justice becomes selective. And selective justice is not justice at all. No one moved. No one whispered. Whitmore looked down at the file in front of him, then back at the young man seated beside his mother. Marcus met the judge's eyes without defiance, without fear. The silence stretched long enough to feel deliberate. Finally, Whitmore spoke. The court finds that the evidence presented raises significant doubt as to the validity of the arrest and the sufficiency of the state's claim. His voice was controlled, stripped of earlier theatrics. Accordingly, the charges against Marcus Brooks are dismissed. The gavel fell, but it did not echo the way it had that morning. It sounded smaller. Marcus exhaled, shoulders lowering for the first time all day. Danielle placed a hand lightly on his arm, studying, grounding. Whitmore looked toward Danielle again. There was something unsettled behind his expression now, something calculating. "You argued effectively today, Ms. Brooks," he said carefully. "You appear experienced." Danielle held his gaze for a long moment. "I am," she replied. She reached into her folder, not quickly, not dramatically, and withdrew a leather identification case. She stepped forward and placed it gently on the bench. Judge Whitmore glanced down. Then he froze. The gold seal caught the overhead light. Danielle Brooks, Chief Deputy State Attorney, 4th Judicial District. The courtroom inhaled as one. Whitmore looked up slowly, color draining from his face. Collins stood halfway out of his chair, stunned. Even the bailiff straightened. Danielle's voice remained calm. "I did not disclose my position earlier because today was not about titles." She closed the folder. It was about observation. A beat of silence. "For the past 4 months, my office has been conducting a procedural review of charging patterns, arrest documentation, and courtroom conduct within this district." Whitmore's grit tightened around the edge of the bench. "I wanted," Danielle continued evenly, "to see how this courtroom treats those without credentials, without influence, without the benefit of assumption." The weight of her words settled slowly, deliberately. "And what I witnessed this morning, before evidence was even examined, was deeply concerning." No one dared interrupt. Danielle stepped back from the bench. "My son's case is resolved. But this review is not." 2 officials from the Judicial Oversight Commission appeared quietly at the rear doors, not dramatic, not forceful, just present. Whitmore's earlier laughter felt like a distant, reckless memory. Danielle turned toward Marcus. "Let's go." They walked down the aisle together, not hurried, not triumphant, simply steady. As the doors opened and closed behind them, the courtroom remained still. Judge Whitmore sat back slowly in his chair, staring at the identification still resting on his bench. For the first time that day, he wasn't the one evaluating someone else. He was being evaluated, and the woman he had laughed at had just finished taking notes.